I am Gary Freed of Z-Axis Corporation. The following video was produced by Z-Axis for the FAA in June of 1988. Due to the increasing air traffic at Phoenix's Sky Harbor Airport, the FAA had just established a Traffic Control Area, or TCA. In a TCA, all aircraft must be in communication with air traffic control. This was a major change for the general aviation community who is used to flying in certain areas without direct communication with controllers. This 10-minute video was a way to introduce the flying public to the new control areas and safety improvements that came along with the TCA.
Phoenix is one of the fastest growing metropolitan areas in the country. Currently ranked 24th in population, projections indicate that it will be the 15th largest metropolitan area within 12 years. This presentation was developed by the Federal Aviation Administration for the aviation community in Phoenix and surrounding areas. Its purpose is to introduce the challenge we share and the planning process currently underway to ensure that air traffic increases will be safely handled as this growing region enters the 21st century. Phoenix has long experienced a great diversity in aviation interests and uses: military, air carrier, air freight, air taxi, and general aviation operations including training, business, and pleasure flights. The many area airports support executive jet services, agricultural operations, and a variety of sport enthusiast activities such as ballooning, sailplaning, hang gliding, and ultralight flying. Local use of airspace also extends to aerial survey and photography, law enforcement operations, surface traffic and news reporting, air ambulance services, and helicopter operations. As the Phoenix area has grown, so have demands on airspace. In recent years, there's been a significant change in the mix of aircraft operations handled at Sky Harbor Airport. In 1980, air carrier and air taxi flights represented 38% of operations. By 1986, that figure rose to 68%. There has also been a substantial increase in the number of passengers at Sky Harbor. In 1980, 3.25 million passengers were enplaned. By 1986, there were more than 6.5 million. This represents a compounded growth of 12.5% annually. This dramatic increase in passengers requires greater efforts by the FAA to ensure that safety margins meet the expectations of the flying public. The risk of mid-air collision is a principal concern of both the aviation community and the general public. This risk is directly related to several factors: the number of aircraft, those aircraft solely relying upon see and avoid procedures, the weather, and the mix of aircraft types. As public and private air travel expanded in the 1960s, congested airspace over the country's large transportation hubs increased the risk of mid-air collision. As a result, the concept of a Terminal Control Area, or TCA, was developed. A TCA consists of designated airspace around a busy airport. All aircraft flying within this airspace must receive separation services from air traffic control and are subject to certain operating rules and equipment requirements. The first TCA was implemented in 1970 in Atlanta. There are currently 23 TCAs within the National Airspace System. The FAA has established guidelines to identify TCA candidate locations based upon two primary elements: the number of enplaned passengers, and the number of aircraft operations. A site qualifies for a TCA if it has 3.5 million passengers enplaned annually, or if the primary airport has 300,000 annual instrument operations, of which 50% or more are air carrier. Phoenix substantially exceeds each of these criteria. The anticipated 1988 passenger count is more than 7 million, and operations will exceed 420,000, of which more than 280,000 will be air carrier. In consideration of both current and future traffic volumes, the FAA is proposing the implementation of a TCA in Phoenix. The regulatory requirements of TCA airspace afford the greatest protection for the greatest number of people. The FAA recognizes there will be an impact in time and cost on all types of aviation operations. However, it is estimated that more than 95% of aircraft presently operating at Sky Harbor Airport are equipped with the necessary avionics equipment to operate within the proposed TCA. Those aircraft not so equipped will incur some costs in becoming equipped. Additionally, certain incremental operating costs will be incurred as a result of air traffic control delays necessary to ensure separation within the proposed TCA. Other costs may be incurred by those electing to avoid flying through the TCA. The implementation of a TCA will also require substantial expenditures by the FAA in its commitment to additional staffing in Phoenix and to improved automation capabilities. These costs are well justified by the need for safety improvements as traffic increases. Studies have been performed to determine the best design structure for a TCA. The philosophy behind the design is to balance maximum safety for all aviation interests with the public's right of transit. The TCA design guidelines were updated by the Administrator's TCA Review Task Group in 1986. These guidelines recommend concentric rings at 10, 20, and 30 nautical miles from the airport. The top of all three rings is at 12,500 feet above sea level. The base altitudes associated with these rings are designed to accommodate the lowest aircraft climb rate. The base of the 10-mile ring is at the surface. The base of the 10 to 20-mile ring is at 3,000 feet above ground level, and the base of the 20 to 30-mile ring is at 6,000 feet above ground level. Modification of this basic design may take into account many other site-specific considerations, such as runway configuration and noise abatement procedures, or the demands of special use airspace. Base altitudes may be adjusted to accommodate approach and departure procedures, adjacent airport operations, terrain, and general aviation traffic flows. The FAA has performed a preliminary study to establish a TCA design for Phoenix. This design will ensure a high margin of safety, accommodate anticipated growth in air traffic, minimize the impact on current operations, and allow the greatest freedom of adjacent airspace use. During this initial planning, significant consideration was given to existing traffic flows. In developing the initial proposed design for the Phoenix TCA, the current guidelines were used and modified to account for the geographic uniqueness of the area, as well as the variety of operations which fall within the 30-mile boundary. In the 10-mile concentric area, the need for controlled airspace from the surface to 12,500 feet was reduced north and south of Sky Harbor due to runway alignments and terrain considerations, as well as to allow ease of access to Scottsdale Municipal and Deer Valley airports. Controlled airspace was also reduced east and west of Sky Harbor by raising the TCA base to 3,000 feet for noise abatement and instrument approach procedures. In the 10 to 20-mile radius, the areas northwest and southeast were modified to exclude airspace within the Luke Air Force Base Approach Control Area of Jurisdiction and the Williams I Military Operations Area. In addition, the floors have been raised for considerations of terrain and air carrier traffic flows. This will allow general aviation aircraft to operate free of regulatory constraints in this area. In the 20 to 30-mile concentric area, additional modifications were required for Luke and Williams Air Force bases. The floors were raised in the remaining areas north and south to allow airspace for general aviation aircraft to operate within those areas of higher terrain free of regulatory constraints. Thus, the proposed TCA design is as shown here. This design will accommodate most existing traffic flows. In many cases, these modifications enable VFR aircraft to fly between various airports within the Phoenix area below the floor of the TCA. To further aid local VFR flight, The FAA is considering an innovation in airspace use by establishing one or more VFR transition routes through the TCA. Similar to a concept developed for the Los Angeles area, these routes might be set up, for example, to allow low-altitude travel north and southbound over Sky Harbor. The FAA is also making other considerations in the Phoenix area, such as improving radar coverage, relocating existing navigational aids, and adding new navigational aids. As the Phoenix area continues to grow, the safety needs of all air travelers will require an expanded commitment by the Federal Aviation Administration, along with the support of the Phoenix aviation community. The FAA has made that commitment and looks forward to working together with the community in meeting the challenge to safely share the skies of Phoenix.